Is your team looking for a mobile right shot defenseman who brings big time size and excellent rush defending? Well, Blake Fiddler might be the player for you, and he's the focus of today's episode.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be delving into the game of a very mobile right shot defenseman who's 6'4", has hockey lineage, and overall is a young player with a lot of runway who's already excelling in killing rushes and sending the puck up back the ice with control. A player with a solid foundation and a lot of runway in Blake Fiddler. In the first segment here today, we'll be breaking down his profile, who this player is, and how good his tools are, the skating, the playmaking, the handling, etc. Then we'll move on to look more at the mental aspects of the game. How smart is this player? What are his habits? And how do his tools interact with one another? And how is he able to stack them together? And finally, we'll wrap things up in the third segment by looking ahead a little bit at where he might go on draft day, which NHL fits would make sense in terms of teams, and which players in the NHL make for decent player comps. All that coming up here on today's episode. So without further ado, let's just dive straight into it here with the profile of Blake Fiddler. He's a 6'4", 209-pound right shot defenseman playing with the Edmonton Oil Kings in the WHL. He's a very young player for this year's draft class as well, which is always notable, as a July 9th, 07 birthday. And again, with that size, with that youth, there's a lot of runway for this player in terms of development down the stretch, especially in terms of building more in the offensive zone, because right now he's excellent in terms of rush defending and in the breakout, but actually generating entries or offensive activations, these things are still more raw in his game. So a player with a lot of things going for him, and the production's also been quite solid this season. With the Oil Kings, he played in 64 games and scored 10 goals and 23 assists for 33 points to go alongside 36 penalty minutes. He also played at the U18 World Championships for Team USA, where he scored 2 goals and 3 points in 7 games and just played a very big role at that tournament, playing over 20 minutes in all but one game, which was like the 10-0 blowout over Switzerland to give him a bit of a break. But overall, just played really heavy minutes on that team and looked really good at some points and a little bit more inconsistent at others, but really shown against really strong competition with Team Sweden, where he just handled their best rushers with real ease. He's such a composed and effective play killer against the rush. So there are these clear strengths in Blake Fiddler's game that will get him drafted, likely in the first round, especially at that size with solid mobility and youth on his side. But where is he being ranked by the public currently? On our most recent Elite Prospects ranking, which is not quite our final one, that's only dropping in a couple days, so I'm not going to spoil that just yet. He was at 22nd overall. He's at 21 on Bob McKenzie's most recent board, 24th for Smott's Scouting, and 39th for Craig Button. So there is some level of variance, but the vast majority of outlets have him as a first-round talent, maybe back half of the first round, and I think there's a lot of unrealized potential still with this player, where maybe he's being underrated a little bit, because this profile is really exciting, and this is a draft class with much less quality in terms of first-round blue line options than last year saw. I mean, this year, right, you have Matthew Schaefer as your one slam dunk top 5, top 1 probably pick on draft day. And then you have Radim Murtka, who's probably going in the top 10, and Jackson Smith, who might be top 15. Same with Kayshawn Aitchison. Logan Hensler's right in that mix as well. But once you drop past that group, you have Blake Fiddler, you have a smaller mobile defenseman in Cameron Reed, and then you have another big tier players beyond that. So I think that Fiddler is going to also have some real arguments in his favor to get drafted higher than what he's being ranked at in the public right now. Maybe even like 15th overall or something in that range. I think it's entirely possible because, again, he has these standout elements. He's big, he's a good skater, and he's the son of Vernon Fiddler, right? He has these things on his side. But let's delve a little bit more specifically into those tools because they are quite interesting and quite special with Blake Fiddler. And let's kick things off with that skating ability because it's a clear area of strength for Fiddler. Going by our elite prospects tool grading scale, which goes from a 1 to a 9, you can look at that in the description down below, where 5 is an NHL like average or baseline kind of projection. He's a 6th grade skater by our evaluations, and I think it's clear that mobility, the lateral explosiveness, the explosive backwards crossovers, angling rushers towards the boards, he's a really controlled rush defender, and all that flows through his feet. He's able to combine that with his long reach, his physical engagement, really suffocating gap in terms of it being very tight and really constricting very regularly. So these things are really strong elements in Blake Fiddler's game, but that mobility is really something that a lot of other elements in his game rest on as a foundation. The physicality might be even better, though. Like, he's a really strong player. I mean, of course, he has that size. It's 6'4". He's over 200 pounds. He has that going for him already, but he also has a good understanding of like leverage mechanics and getting underneath opponents and holding inside positioning to keep attackers towards the outside. He's good at protecting that middle lane in the slot in the defensive zone as well. So the physicality is clearly a strength. He's able to clear the net front quite effectively, and it's only going to get better. He's quite physically matured, though, which has to be taken of note as well. There are other players who are going to still be growing significantly more, both in height and weight, whereas Fiddler is probably around the size he's going to be at in the NHL. Maybe add another 15 pounds or so, bring him to 225. I think that's probably his playing weight when he's in the National Hockey League. But let's talk about a bit more of the puck skill specifically, because we've talked about the off-puck things a lot here already. But how is this player on the puck? Not the biggest shooting threat. We'll start with that. Mechanically, fine. Like, he gets a decent amount of power off. He can hammer shots from the blue line, but he's not like a goal scorer by trade. He doesn't have the same scoring habits like a player like Kayshawn Aitchison does, who we just covered as well in a recent episode here on the podcast. So a player that can shoot the puck. He got 10 goals this season. But he's not like really a threat to score consistently. And the shot should not be a reason to select this player on draft day either. But the passing significantly better, especially in the breakout. This is a player who is able to have a gravitational pull on checkers, get them into his orbit, and then slip a puck past them towards a streaking winger. He's able to hit on those medium range passes with real pace and precision. And even though he's not the most complex passer in the world, he'll use one deceptive element, show one thing, do another, but there isn't the most layering or nuance to those plays. Still a very effective passer who excelled in controlled breakouts this season in the WHL. He's among the best draft eligibles in that category across all 3 CHL leagues this season, because he's very aware of his options and is able to execute on plays that are maybe a bit more complex and simple, but still straightforward things that are sustainable to do time and time again. So those are elements I really respect as well in Blake Fiddler's game, and that goes through the passing. And I also think the passing could grow into a bit more of a playmaking tool with time. It'll take a couple years, but there's a foundation here also in the activation habits that flash some real dynamism to grow more as a playmaker. But the shot is probably not the offensive tool to build around. Last but not least, we have the puck handling. And this is also, I think, kind of in between the shot and the passing. It's probably just a baseline NHL projection that's going to be totally fine in the NHL, but not special in any capacity. He's not a player that creates through his hands, but he's able to solve individual problems that aren't too complex, and he's able to adapt with his hands to also support his teammates and just solve these simpler stuff rather than dangling through opposition. He's not the most dynamic of puck handlers, but he's capable, and his hands keep up with his feet, which is the most important part. When he's skating at higher speeds, he's not losing or bobbling the puck constantly. He's quite capable in those facets. But that wraps things up here for the first segment. In the next one, we're going to look a bit more at the IQ, the hockey sense, the habits with Blake Fiddler. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feel fueled for longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for my busy days. Whether I'm at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in shell variety are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's keep things rolling here in the second segment, talking about Blake Fiddler of the Edmonton Oil Kings. And let's kick things off here a little bit by broaching the hockey sense, the IQ. And this is a very broad and layered thing to break down. There's so many different elements. Of course, the normal stuff, right? Like habits and positioning, scanning frequently, being aware of one's surroundings. These are very important elements of intelligence and hockey sense. But on top of that, you also have the more dynamic elements like vision and creativity and manipulation and deception. These are also things that are very mental rather than just purely physical. And Blake Fiddler is very good in some areas and not so great in others. So I think he balances out as about an NHL average thinker of the game when you look at all of those different elements, but he's far from average in each individual one. There's a little bit erratic in terms of a thinker of the game. On the plus hand, you have the actual rush defending habits, being able to read opposing like rushers along the boards and being able to calculate the angle of attack he needs to use to shepherd them towards the boards and contain them very effectively. These things he calculates quickly, he recognizes fast, and is able to execute with real pace. That's great. There's processing speed there. There's awareness. There's vision. These things are quite strong. And you also see like vision and awareness flashing in the offensive zone as a puck activator and playmaker, where he's able to like deceive and manipulate a little bit, drag defenders out of position, and then exploit the space behind them with a really good little hook pass or trying to target their triangle. There's a level of adaptability in his thinking of the game, but there's also certainly some level of inconsistency in the decision-making processes. Like I've caught games where he's looked really frantic and chaotic and just trying to manage everything all at once. And by doing so, being behind everything on most shifts. These games happened this season, but I also saw a player in most games and many games uh, where he was very much a player who was setting the tone, setting the pace, controlling transition, especially in both directions, killing the rushes he was facing and quickly sending the puck back up the ice with control. So I think it's kind of a give and take in terms of the habits and the awareness. There are certain moments of breakdowns in scanning as well around the net front and against the cycle, especially against like long cycles. If he was on the ice already for like a minute and 20 seconds of just forgetting to shoulder check every like second or two and losing a player that falls into his blind spot who ends up scoring a goal. There are these immaturities in the way he processes the game and thinks the game, and we saw this throughout the season. And it's one of the reasons that he's been ranked lower than like perhaps the on paper profile would suggest he would be in a draft class like this one. So quite a few interesting elements here with Blake Fiddler, but I also want to note how he's able to layer some of his tools with real wonderful effect. First and foremost, we have the layering of his physicality and skating against the rush. He's such a strong rush defender, and this is really fueled by those two tools. Suffocating gap, play killing habits, active stick. He hides his reach, extends with poke checks, doesn't always play the body. There's a diversity in how he closes his gaps. He's not the most predictable of rush defenders, which is also a very important thing if you're thinking of projecting the strength in this area of the game to the NHL level. And on top of that, you also have in the breakout the layering of his passing and skating ability being really strong in terms of being able to access little pockets in the defensive zone where he's not going to encounter pressure for 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, and is able to lift his head, locate the best passing option, and go and hit it. This awareness and this ability to spark plays in the breakout is very much supported by above average mobility and passing ability. I also wanted to note here that he has a real rare combination of stuff and tools and habits for a player that's going to be available, likely past 20th overall on draft day. The size, right? 6'4", over 200 pounds. The mobility, clear plus level of skating for the NHL level. Young for the draft class, strong rush defending, and a real skill in the breakout. There's a level of cohesion with those strengths, and there are certainly like elements of immaturity in certain decisions he makes, but these things I think are going to improve with time when he has another year or two of development under his belt. And I think that these high end tools are only going to look stronger and stronger with every passing season. So to wrap up this segment, I did want to just read one scouting report from one of my colleagues over at Elite Prospects on Blake Fiddler this season. And I will highlight David St. Louis' scouting report from the January 4th game between the Edmonton Oil Kings and the Lethbridge Hurricanes in the WHL. He writes, Fiddler has offensive chops. When defenders rush at him, he fakes and dangles them, getting past and attacking the slot. He has one of those reactive modes and the skating ability to pull them off. His feints are made with good timing too, for the most part. One of them backfires, and as he lost the puck, the opposition rushed the other way. His defense also stood out as a strength in this game. He can surf, angle well, and finish his checks. Timing could improve slightly there as he missed an aggressive hit, but went down on a 2-on-1, leaving his feet. But with his size, it's not always a bad strategy. He was able to clog up that passing lane very effectively. Breakouts were rims for the most part, even when teammates skated open to the middle. But Fiddler is raw and inconsistent as always. Hockey Sense grades as average to below average for me at the moment, but he has the opportunities to improve the tactical side of the game. A potential second pairing defenseman with a high end certainty of at least playing games due to his tools. He's probable that he becomes more of a safer insulator who lets the game come to him and defends the middle if the processing doesn't improve. So that, I think, is a really good encapsulation of how Blake Fiddler plays the game of hockey, right? There are real upsides to how he plays, but also real growing pains in how he thinks the game and how he manages pace in different phases of the game. So that wraps up the second segment for us here. In the next one, we're going to look ahead where it might go on draft day and which NHL player comps make the most sense for him. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. All righty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, talking about Blake Fiddler of the Edmonton Oil Kings. And he is such a fascinating case study to me because I would not be shocked if this were a player who all year long were being ranked in the top 15 and that I had some frustrations with how he thinks the game and the consistency, but could understand why he's being ranked in that range. But instead, I find myself in a camp where I'm a little bit confused why he hasn't been ranked that high, because he has all of these special elements and these tools. And sure, there are immaturities here, but as a young player coming from a hockey family who's young for the draft class and took some really big strides this season, I see some real potential for this player as a like 15 to 20th kind of selection on draft day, especially if you see the defensemen like Aitchison and Hensler and Jackson Smith go well ahead of him, like in like the top 12 or top 13 range. Who are the next defensemen that are going to be contending for picks inside the top 20? Blake Fiddler is the main one I can think of. So pretty interesting there in terms of where it might go on draft day and how dependent it's going to be on where the other defensemen end up going on draft day. But I think that the likely range for him is still going to be between 20th and 32nd overall. That's where he's been ranked all year long. It's where he kind of seems to be settling, also with the industry chatter of what NHL scouts are saying and their impressions of this player. I think that's probably still the range, but I still think a team's going to get a really good value swing in the 20s if Blake Fiddler is still on the board. And there's quite a few teams that could really use a player of this mold. And first and foremost, I'm thinking of the team that's actually picking at 20th overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets. They need a right shot defenseman. They lost Adam Jiricek, and they really need a replacement for that. And one of the things I'm sure they don't really want to repeat from the Jiricek experiment is a player who has suffered like a really big injury where the mobility is an area that needs a lot of fine tuning, and that the injury also affected that skating in its draft year season. Fiddler has skating on his side, right? He's big. He's a way better skater than Jiricek ever will be. And while he's not nearly as refined offensively or as creative or as manipulative, he has those elements and they were growing over the course of the season. And on top of that, he brings a bit more solidity and consistency in the defensive zone, especially in his rush defending and breakout habits. So I think the Blue Jackets could really be interested in a player like this. Do I think they might go for a guy like Logan Hensler first if he's still available? Sure. And they might even go for a guy like Logan Hensler with their first round draft selection at, I believe, is 14th overall. That's also kind of the range for Hensler, and they might not want to go for two right shot defensemen. But if they go for a different player at that slot, I think Fiddler makes loads of sense here at 20th overall. Next, I also wanted to broach the Nashville Predators selection in at 23rd overall, which they got from the Tampa Bay Lightning in, I believe it was the Ryan McDonagh deal. And going out and selecting a toolsy, mobile, like defenseman with runway, with the selection you got from Ryan McDonagh, I think is a nice little like theme of irony there. I mean, working out well for Tampa Bay as well. I mean, McDonagh's been excellent ever since the trade, but I think Nashville could also really pay up big in terms of getting a massive player here in that trade where they lost Ryan McDonagh. So I think Fiddler would be a really good fit there as well, and bolstering the right side never hurts. Of course, they lost Dante Fabro this year as well, so kind of getting another player who can fit in down that right side long term, I think makes loads of sense for the Nashville Predators, who need an infusion of high end tools, including down the right side on the blue line. Last but not least, if he were to fall towards the end of the first round, I think that the San Jose Sharks would love to snap him up at 32nd overall. The chances of him being available aren't the highest at that range, but still, if he's available, I think that the Sharks would love a player like this. They need help down the right side. They need to get better defensively, especially while defending the rush, and they need to add size. Fiddler checks all those boxes, and he's young for the class and has offensive runway. That's a very exciting profile for a young team like the Sharks, who aren't going to be competing for the next 3 years in all likelihood. And after selecting potentially a player like Michael Misa at second overall, I think that adding a guy like Fiddler to shore up that blue line and add, again, high-end tools and mobility and physicality, which they've been targeting with their selections recently as well. If you're thinking of players like Sam Dickinson and Leo Salim Valenius, there are some really standout tools among these players that they're targeting, and Fiddler has those. So those are, I think, some really good fits among NHL teams for a player and a profile like Blake Fiddler. But let's talk a little bit more about his overall ceiling and floor in the NHL. I think a play killing, puck moving second pair projection is really kind of the ceiling with Fiddler. I don't see that top pairing upside. I think that there are too many breakdowns when he's under pressure. I think managing matchups against the top players in the world might be a bit difficult in terms of consistency and being able to bring both the rush defending and the breakout and the on puck game consistently night in, night out. I feel like he'll be able to bring one or two of those every night, but that one might be missing when he's playing the likes of Connor McDavid, if he's getting those big matchup minutes. But still, a guy I think is going to be able to play those second pair minutes if he hits that peak, if the tools translate, if the skills grow, if he's able to expand the boundaries of his game a little bit. This is a second pairing defenseman that you could get in the late first, maybe even early second round. That's a very exciting prospect in my eyes. And in terms of floor, you're probably talking about a depth NHL defenseman, maybe a seventh D who plays a bit more in the playoffs when you want to get a bit more size in your lineup and that rush defending and that aggression, while in terms of the gap management and just restricting time and space from the opposition. But if the skills don't continue to grow, if the decision making still sees the same breakdowns down the stretch, then sure, maybe he's just a depth piece. But I would wager that he ends up closer to that ceiling than to that floor at the end of the day. And which NHL player does that remind you of? I'd love to actually hear your own player comps in the comments down below, because there aren't that many players that immediately came to mind for me. I don't spend like hours on these player comps. It's kind of like some of the first ideas that come to mind, as well as other player comps I've heard going around. And with Fiddler, the one that we've been talking about a bit internally at Elite Prospects has been Adam Larson, right? Big, mobile. He was very physically mature in his draft year as well, just like Fiddler is. He went way higher on draft day than Fiddler is going to, but also brings that combination of strength in the breakout and strength against the rush, and using his physicality and mobility in combination in every phase of play. I can see that comp quite well. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are down below as well. But that wraps things up here for us today. If you're watching on YouTube, please do make sure to leave us a comment, like, subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always appreciated. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian Hein. I look forward to catching you listening again very, very soon.